Alright guys, it's Crash at MMA back with another video. So, I don't know how many of you guys don't know this by this point. It's kind of like the biggest news we've had in the UFC for a long time. But Dana White's recently announced two huge main events for UFC 317 and UFC 319, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about them because they are some pretty major fights in the lightweight and middleweight divisions. So, first one to talk about, of course, is Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. Let's just get right into it. This is such an interesting fight. You know, when Bilal versus JDM was announced, they were talking about how if Bilal lost, Islam would be moving up. So I was sort of holding on to hope that Bilal would win that fight so that Ilia versus Islam would happen, but it looks like Islam is actually moving up to face Jack Della Maddalena for the welterweight title, and in his place, it looks like he's vacated his title, and Ilia Topuria will be taking on Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight belt. Now, I have mixed opinions about Islam leaving the division, especially vacating his belt. But I actually do think it might not be his fault that he vacated. The UFC might have forced his hand a little bit, but I'll talk about that in another video later this week. But in my opinion, this is an incredibly intriguing matchup. This is a very interesting matchup. And I think people aren't giving both of these fighters enough credit. I think this is a super close fight, super interesting, and it's very exciting. This definitely saved a UFC 317 card because looking at the rest of the card, which we will talk about later in this video because it was announced with this main event, but looking at the rest of the card, this card wouldn't have been basically pay-per-view worthy at all if it wasn't for a massive main event like this. This is a generational main event, very interesting matchup. You have a guy in Ilia Topuria moving up after a very short reign at featherweight, one title defense, and that's it. But he did beat Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski back to back, two of the greatest featherweights of all time, two of the greatest fighters, period, of all time. Moving up to face Charles, who is a former champion and probably the best or second best fighter in the division other than Islam Makhachev. People are sort of forgetting about Armin. That's another thing. I'll talk about that later this week too, but this is, you know, huge fight. Now, I do kind of want to do an early prediction, and I'm just going to go with who I'm leaning towards. Later this week, I'm going to be posting a video sort of breaking it down a little bit more and giving like a full early breakdown and prediction on who I think is going to win this fight. But right now, I am leaning a little bit towards Charles, which a lot of people will probably call me crazy for, and I could definitely see Ilia winning this fight. I just think Charles is big. Ilia is a little bit small in my opinion for featherweight. Moving up to lightweight, and with how short he's going to be, he's 5'7", you know what I mean? Like, he's very small in stature, and yes, he has a lot of power. I just think Charles' size is going to be a big factor that a lot of people aren't taking into account with this one. So I'm leaning Charles, but this is a very 50-50 fight because you have a guy with one of the highest finishing potentials in UFC history in Charles Oliveira going up against Ilia Topuria, who we've just seen knock out Max Holloway, who obviously had never been knocked out up to that point and had only been dropped once against Justin Gaethje at UFC 300. So this is a very interesting matchup just because of how the different styles and everything collide. Like I said, I'm more going to be talking about the significance of this in this video, though. I'll give a full breakdown video as we get closer to the fight. But what I will say is that the winner of this is going to probably go on to take a couple places higher in the GOAT list. Because if I'm thinking about it, Islam Makhachev moving up to welterweight, even if he wins the welterweight title, but especially if he loses, I don't see him going back down to lightweight to fight the winner of this matchup, which sucks. You know, there's three more matchups I wanted to see with Islam: fight Armin, Ilia, and Gaethje at this weight class. But if he's going to be abandoning it to go to welterweight, I don't see him cutting down again to go back down to lightweight, especially given how often we've seen in the past fighters who go down in weight class after moving up. They look worse coming back. Max Holloway against Ilia Topuria is a great example. Packed on a bunch of extra weight, got, you know what I mean, bulked up, fought at lightweight, and then had to deal with, he was already having a hard enough time cutting down to 145, but now he's packed on extra weight, and he got used to fighting at 155. Granted, it was only one fight, but he has an even more brutal cut, and he didn't look as good against Ilia Topuria. So Islam probably doesn't want to meet that fate. So the winner of this fight is probably going to stay lightweight champ for a while. And that's really interesting to me. I think whoever wins this fight, I don't think there's anybody else in the division that probably beats them. Maybe Arman could beat Charles, but I would say Ilya would beat Arman. And I think Charles, with the improvements that he showed in the Michael Chandler rematch, could honestly beat Arman if he had a better game plan this time. Arman barely survived last time, getting put in 2 close submission attempts. But yeah, this is a very interesting fight, very important for the division, because without a good championship fight, especially now that Islam vacated, the division probably would have been, you know, completely in disarray. So this is a great fight. 2 guys with a lot of aura basically facing each other, getting the lightweight title situation figured out again. And overall, this is just a very intriguing matchup. It saved the UFC 317 card. It would have sucked to see an international fight week card with a terrible main event, like, because we all know they're not going to make John Jones versus Tom Aspinall. John Jones isn't going to, you know, fight a true #1 contender. That's a little bit too much to ask, you know, but this definitely saved the card. And there were some other fights announced for this card. Pantoja versus Kai Kara France. We all knew this fight was happening. It was rumored. I thought it would have been actually earlier than they did it at 317, but, you know, fair enough. This is a fight. I think we all know Pantoja's probably just going to win this fight, but, you know, an extra title defense to add to his resume. Moicano versus Dariush got booked again. I love Moicano, as you guys probably know. One of my earliest videos on this channel, one of my most popular videos was me saying Moicano would beat Islam. You know, that didn't pan out well, but, you know, Moicano, I think, is going to beat Dariush. But either way, this is an interesting fight. It's, you know, neither of these guys are really going to go on any crazy title run anymore. They're a little bit older, but it's an intriguing matchup. Brandon Royval versus Manel Kape, probably the 2 best flyweights in the division, apart from the champion, facing off. This is a very intriguing matchup. Manel Kape has looked like insane in his last couple. He's literally looked like a ninja. Destroyed Bruno Silva. Destroyed what's his name? Sual Mabayev. He's looking great. And Brandon Royval, of course, is always good. Beat Tatsuro Taira in a close fight, and, you know, he's just had some great performances recently. So this is an intriguing fight. Costa versus Kopylov. Both guys who have lost a ton of hype, in my opinion. Kopylov, after Cesar Almeida made him gas out and turn into a wrestler, and Paulo Costa obviously is kind of just a jobber at middleweight right now. Like, he's not really doing much. You know, he hasn't really had an elite, like, high-level win in a long time. And then, of course, we have Jack Hermansson fighting Gregory Rodriguez. Jack Hermansson, I honestly forgot he existed. Like, he had that great performance against Joe Pyfer, where he just fraud-checked one of the most hyped-up prospects in the division, and then he just, like, despawned for 2 years. But now he's back, and he's probably going to fraud check Gregory Rodriguez Part 2 after Cannonier did it. But, you know, Jack Hermansson's always fun to see fight, and we got a heavyweight fight here, too. Justin Tafa is about to get smoked by Jonata Denise. So, yeah, overall, big announcements for International Fight Week. The main event is great. I'll have a video later this week going more into depth about the actual, you know, technical matchups of this fight and sort of talking about who I think is really going to win. But, yeah, I do want to move on, though, to another exciting fight that got announced. Another major fight announcement that we got from Dana White is the main event for UFC 319. Dricus du Plessis finally facing off against Khamzat Chimaev. We've been waiting for this fight since Khamzat destroyed Robert Whittaker in a round. You know, we had to watch Strickland versus du Plessis too, which, fair enough, Strickland did deserve the shot, but I think we all were really waiting for this fight mostly. Now, I don't know why they booked this for 319 in Chicago, I believe. Yeah, it's in Chicago, of all places. You have Khamzat fighting the South African Dricus here. It really doesn't make too much sense, but this matchup is very interesting to me just because I've always really been curious. Like, in my mind, I just think Khamzat destroys him. But then I really think about it, and I'm like, Dricus can probably figure out a way to fluke some kind of, like, goofy win over Khamzat in the most Dricus way possible. Like, we know Khamzat doesn't have an amazing gas tank, and we know Dricus just somehow wins fights. Like, he keeps winning. So, this is going to be a real collision of styles here. I'm very interested in this fight. Now, I've always said, though, I do think Khamzat is going to smoke Dricus, and I think I'm going to stick with that pick, just because Khamzat, every time he's grappled with somebody, he's dominated them, and we have seen Dricus lose a lot of grappling exchanges against the likes of Derek Brunson and them. So I think Khamzat's just going to be too good of a grappler. I mean, what he did to Whitaker in their fight, Whitaker has really, really underrated wrestling for the division. If you watch his fights with Yoel Romero and those kinds of fights, and Khamzat just immediately took him down and destroyed him. Usman had like an insanely high takedown defense rate, one of the best grapplers of all time, and then Khamzat goes in there and just ragdolls him for the first round. And even rounds 2 and 3 after he gassed in that fight, he still got easy takedowns. So this is just a very intriguing matchup, though, because Dricus, he somehow finds ways to make things work on the feet. He's huge. He's a very thick man. Why did I word it like that? Pause. But he's a huge guy, tons of power, and you can hear it every time he lands against like Strickland, all of them. So he has a ton of power, and should Khamzat for some reason not be able to make his grappling work and potentially get into the later rounds with Dricus, I could see Dricus just somehow finding a finish like he did against Izzy. Like, he's not always the most technically sound, but he can use his physicality in a lot of ways. Like, if you watch that Izzy fight, the last takedown that he got before he subbed Izzy, he kind of just grabbed him and dragged him down. It wasn't like a super technically sound takedown, but Dricus is just that big, that physical and athletic that he's able to do things like that. And we've seen in the Strickland fights and fights like that, he has great 5-round cardio. It's interesting because a couple years ago, he was sort of thought of, by the fan base as a guy who didn't have great cardio, and he just sort of went in there in round 1 and had some, blitzed you, had some good shots, and then gassed out later. But, I was one of those people, and then he had the whole thing where he's like, I'm getting nose surgery, and that's going to fix all my cardio problems, and I think me, along with the majority of the fan base, called bullshit on that. We sort of said, I'll believe it when I see it type of thing, but it turns out it was true. Like, this guy has had some of the best gas tank improvements ever. His cardio is really good now. He has 5-round proven cardio, as he's shown in all of his title fights. So I think that's going to be a big factor here too. We know Khamzat, his cardio isn't terrible, but his pacing is awful. He likes to dump the gas tank in round 1 and look for a finish, which, when you're the most dangerous round 1 fighter of all time like Khamzat is, you probably, there's a good argument that you should be doing that. But, you know what I mean? Like, if he doesn't get that finish, he's not as good throughout the rest of the fight. But he is also, like Dricus, very powerful. He's huge, too. He's 6'2", big guy. So this is overall just a super intriguing fight. I'm glad we finally got this. I would have thought this would have been earlier. It's been, I believe, 8 months or 6 months or something like that since Dricus fought, and I'm just glad we're getting this finally. I hope Khamzat doesn't pull out. There were the rumors that Dricus was injured, so maybe that played into this, is that they had to delay the fight. So overall, though, this is a really great fight. Very intriguing matchup, huge for the middleweight division. If either one of them manages to win, if he beats Khamzat, he might be on his way to the middleweight GOAT. Like, call me crazy, but Sean Strickland, Izzy, Khamzat, that would be a crazy resume. And if Khamzat beats Dricus, Dricus is probably the best middleweight champion we've seen in recent years. just based off of his style, based off of the guys he's beat, like Strickland. People don't think about it, but both those Strickland wins are amazing wins. Izzy beating him in the way he did, really incredible. If Khamzat can be the first person to defeat Dricus in the UFC, so whichever way this fight goes, it's going to be huge. Big ramifications in the middleweight division. But yeah, tell me what you guys think in the comments. Who you think's gonna win these two major matchups between Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev, and Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. As we get closer to these fights, I'll make some more videos talking about them. But yeah, and then one more thing I wanted to address before the video's over. Yeah, I did despawn again. I know I haven't posted in like a month when this video comes out. But hear me out. There is a good explanation. I was finishing up finals for my senior year in high school. So now that those are all over, I don't really have any real responsibilities for the next couple of months. So I'll be able to go back to posting consistently. So yeah, and I know I said that last time I took a long break, but just trust. More videos are on the way. I already got 3 that I'm currently making. So I'll post a few more this week. Yeah. With that being said, I'll catch you guys.